My mother's voice was flat. No warmth, no hesitation. Danny, your sister doesn't want you there. It's her day. Please don't make this about you. I held the phone tight and kept my voice steady. Mom, did she actually say that? Those exact words. You know how you are? She said. You always do something to embarrass us. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there in my apartment, and I looked at the dress hanging on the back of my door. The one I pressed 2 days ago. Then I looked at the printed plane ticket sitting on my kitchen counter. What my mother didn't know, and what my sister definitely didn't expect, was who was going to walk through those doors with me. My name is Celeste. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in a mid-sized city in Ohio where everyone knows your business before you do. I work as a freelance content writer and a part-time online instructor. My life is steady. It's built on real work, real hours, real focus. No corner office, no designer bags, no family money behind me. Just me, my laptop, and the kind of discipline that most people don't see because it doesn't make noise. I'm the youngest of three. And if you grew up as the youngest in a family like mine, you already know what that can mean. I was the extra, the one who didn't get the big birthday parties, the one whose college graduation my mother almost didn't attend because Renee had a bridal shower the same weekend. And my mom said, "You'll understand, baby." I understood. All right. I understood exactly what my place was in that family's story. Renee was everything our mother wanted in a daughter. Prettier by the family's standards. She married young, checked every box on my mother's mental list, and carried herself like the world had agreed to center itself around her. And for a long time, in our house, it had. I wasn't rich or glamorous, and I never pretended to be, but I had spent years building something quietly, carefully, and they had no idea. I wasn't bitter. Bitterness takes too much energy and leaves nothing useful behind. What I had trained myself to be, was patient, and I had been patient long enough. If your family has ever made you feel invisible while someone else got all the attention and all the credit, I want you to know right now that you are not alone in that. Subscribe to this channel because this community was built for exactly you. Drop a comment and tell me, were you the overlooked one in your family? Let's talk about it. And if this already feels like your story, click share right now because someone in your life needs to hear this today. 2 weeks before the wedding, I got a text. Not a call, a text. It came from my cousin Brianna, who was Renee's maid of honor, and it was written in the kind of careful, polished language that people use when they've rehearsed what they're going to say. She told me my invitation had been revised and that I was no longer on the guest list. She said she hoped I understood. I called Renee directly. She answered on the third ring, and her voice was cold right from the start. Celeste, I need everything to be perfect. You know how things go sideways when you're around. I asked her calmly and clearly to give me one example, one real, specific example of something I had done to ruin something for her. She went quiet. Then she talked about the energy I bring, about old feelings, about how I make people uncomfortable without ever being able to say how or why or when. It wasn't a reason. It was a feeling dressed up as a reason. Then my mother joined the call. She didn't even pause. She's the bride. Her wishes come first. You can watch the video later. Celeste, watch the video later. My own sister's wedding. Like I was a stranger requesting a live stream. I found out the real reason 3 days later, through a cousin who felt guilty enough to tell me the truth. Renee's new in-laws had somehow gotten the impression that I was the struggling one in the family. Renee didn't want her image complicated. She didn't want her new husband's family looking at me and drawing conclusions about where she came from. So she edited me out, quietly, cleanly, like you crop someone out of a photo. I sat with that for a long time. The humiliation of it, not just being excluded, but being curated out of my own family story because my sister was ashamed of me, and I hadn't done a single thing wrong. I sat with it, and then I made my decision. I was going anyway. The first thing they did after that was remove me from the family wedding group chat. I didn't even know it had happened. I found out when my Aunt Gloria accidentally texted me directly, asking why I'd gone so quiet. I had to tell her I didn't know what she was talking about. She got flustered, apologized, and went quiet herself. That's when I understood. They had been planning, laughing, celebrating, coordinating, all of it in a group I was no longer part of. Days of it. And nobody said a word to me. Then came the family dinner, a pre-wedding dinner at a restaurant 2 days before the wedding. I wasn't invited. I found out through Instagram, where my mother had posted a photo of herself with Renee and my older sister Dana, arms around each other, smiling wide. The caption said, "All my girls together." That was it. No asterisk, no mention. I wasn't in the photo, and I wasn't in the words. To anyone looking at that post, I simply did not exist. I stared at that photo for a long time, the way my mother's smile looked in it, completely unbothered. Then my father called. My father almost never calls. He stays in the background, lets things pass, avoids conflict like it's something contagious. So when his name came up on my screen, I actually thought for one small second that maybe someone in that family was reaching out with some genuine care. "Celeste," he said, "I'm asking you not to do anything dramatic. Your sister worked hard for this day. Just stay home. Stay home." He hadn't called to check on me. He hadn't called to say this wasn't right. He had been sent to deliver a message. I could hear it in how carefully he said it, like he'd practiced the words on the drive over to wherever he was. Renee had gotten to him too. She'd assembled the whole family like a defense line, and my father was the last one they sent out. I thanked him for calling. I hung up, and I kept moving. I didn't post anything. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't text Renee back with a list of her wrongs. Every time they pushed me out, they forgot one thing. I had stopped asking for a seat a long time ago. Here's the part they really didn't know. For the past 2 years, I had been running a channel. Anonymous. No face, no real name. Just a voice, a perspective, and stories about family, money, self-worth, and what it looks like to rebuild yourself quietly while the people who underestimated you are still writing their own comfortable narratives. The channel had grown steadily, then quickly, and then faster than I'd expected. 400,000 subscribers. Brand partnerships that paid real money every month. More money in a single month than Renee's fiancé brought home from his accounting firm. And not one single person in my family had any idea it was me. What they didn't know was that the woman they were hiding from their in-laws had been quietly becoming someone those same in-laws might actually recognize if they knew where to look. And here is where the timing becomes almost too perfect to believe. That same weekend as the wedding, I had been invited to speak at a media and content creators summit. In the same city, I had already confirmed my slot. The summit was happening the day of the wedding, and the closing cocktail reception for the summit was being held in the evening in the same hotel as the wedding reception. The same hotel, different floors. I knew this, and I also knew who the keynote speaker was. Her name is Diana. She's 52, and she is one of the most quietly powerful people in digital media. She found my channel 18 months ago, reached out through a contact, and has been mentoring me ever since. She doesn't do things loudly. She just knows things, and she knows people, and when she walks into a room, the room adjusts itself around her. Diana was the keynote speaker at that summit, and that evening, she would be at the cocktail hour in the same hotel where Renee's reception was being held one floor above. When I told Diana the full story, I didn't dramatize it. I just laid it out, plainly. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Come to the summit. Walk in with your head up. What happens after that is just life doing what it does." That was it. No strategy. No revenge plan. Just show up. Be yourself. Let life do the rest. Meanwhile, back in my family's world, the confidence had apparently reached new heights. Renee told a cousin she was relieved Celeste had finally accepted her place. My mother was telling wedding guests that I couldn't make it, framing my exclusion as my own choice, building a polite little story out of their decision, so no one would ask uncomfortable questions. I booked my flight. I packed my dress, the good one, The one that fits exactly right. And the night before the wedding, I sent my mother one text. 3 words. See you tomorrow. She didn't respond. But I found out later she showed that text to Renee immediately. And for the first time in this whole process, Renee felt something shift. Not guilt, not quite, but something close to uncertainty. That flicker you get when you realize you might have miscalculated. Good. Let her sit with that. The day of the wedding, I did not go to the ceremony. I went to the summit. I sat in the front section. I listened to Diana deliver a keynote that made the room go completely still. Then I gave my own talk, and the response was warm in the way that real recognition feels, not polite, not performative, but genuine. People came up to me afterward who knew the channel, knew the content, knew what I'd built. They spoke to me like I was someone, because I was. By evening, the summit had moved into its closing cocktail hour in the hotel's lower-level event space. It smelled like fresh flowers and expensive candles, and the faint trace of warm hors d'oeuvres being carried on silver trays. Diana was working the room the way she always does, steady and warm, making introductions that mattered. She brought me over to a small group near the window. 2 of them, a married couple, turned out to be close friends of Renee's new in-laws. Diana mentioned the channel name when she introduced me. The woman's face changed instantly. Her hand went to her chest. "Wait," she said. "You're her? We love your channel. My wife cries every time you post." I smiled. I thanked her. We talked for 20 minutes. Word moved through that hotel the way word always moves in small connected circles. By the time the wedding reception was underway 1 floor above, those 2 guests had mentioned my name to Renee's in-laws. The in-laws mentioned it to each other, then to Renee's new husband, and then someone, I don't know who, said it to Renee. Renee's mother-in-law, a gracious woman named Patricia, came downstairs herself. She found me near the bar, introduced herself, and told me she'd just heard about the channel and was completely charmed. Then, with a generous smile, she said, "You should come upstairs and join us. It's a family reception, and you're family." She had no idea at all what she had just done. I looked at Diana. She raised her glass slightly. I straightened my dress, and we walked to the elevator together. The reception was all white tablecloths and low centerpieces, and the soft sound of a string quartet playing somewhere near the back. The room was full and warm and glittering, and then the room saw me. My mother noticed first. I watched the color leave her face in real time. Across the room, Renee was mid-pose for a photo with her new husband, and she froze. The photographer had to ask her twice to look at the camera. Within minutes, Renee was at my elbow. She pulled me a few steps away from the crowd, her voice low and tight. "How did you get up here?" "I told them you weren't coming." I looked at her calmly. "I wasn't," I said, "but your mother-in-law invited me up. I didn't think it was polite to say no." There was nothing she could say to that. Nothing, because to argue it, she would have had to explain why I had been excluded in the first place. And she couldn't do that in front of her new husband's family without dismantling every careful impression she'd built. Patricia spent most of that evening near me. She asked about the channel, about my work, about where I saw it going. By 10 o'clock, she had pulled out her phone at the table and subscribed. Right there, in front of her son, in front of my sister, in front of my mother, who was sitting 3 tables away watching all of it with a face that had gone very, very still. Neither of them said a word, because the only thing worse than what I'd walked into would have been explaining to everyone present exactly how I'd ended up there. I left before the reception ended. I didn't need the ending, Diana, and I walked out of that hotel and into the cool night air, and I felt lighter than I had in years. I hadn't made a speech. I hadn't exposed anyone. I hadn't cried or shouted or sent a group text laying out every wrong they'd done. I had simply walked into a room I was told I didn't belong in, and I had existed there, fully on my own terms, and that had been enough. The days after were messy for them, not for me. Renee came home from her honeymoon to quiet questions from Patricia about the channel. and why the family hadn't mentioned such an accomplished sister. My mother fielded texts from relatives who had seen the wedding photos and noticed I wasn't in any of them, which was now a visible gap rather than a clean edit. The story they'd built started pulling apart at the seams because stories built on omission always do eventually. A week after the wedding, Dana called, my older sister, who had been in that restaurant photo, who had been in that group chat, who had never once called to say, this isn't right. She didn't fully apologize, but she said, I didn't know about the channel, Celeste. None of us did. I should have called more. It wasn't enough. I want to be honest about that. One phone call doesn't repair years of being treated like an afterthought, but it was something, a crack in the wall. And I've learned that sometimes a crack is where you start. I posted a new video that week. No names, no details, just the feeling. The feeling of walking into a space where people assumed you didn't belong and realizing that their assumptions said nothing about your value and everything about their imagination. The comments filled up within hours. Thousands of people who recognized the feeling, who had been cropped out of photos, left off invite lists, quietly managed out of spaces that were supposed to include them. They spent so much energy keeping me out that they never stopped to wonder what I was building while they weren't looking. And when I finally walked in, I didn't need the invitation anymore. If someone in your family has ever tried to hide you from photos, from tables, from their version of the perfect story, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not a flaw to be edited out. You are the whole story. Subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever been erased from a moment that was supposed to include you? Your story belongs here. Hit share and help this reach every person who has been quietly cut out. They need to know they are not alone. Standing up for yourself is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, especially when it's family. If you've been there, subscribe and be part of this community. It means more than you know. And click share to let this story travel. Tell me where you're watching from. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories go.